you got a recent email. Oh yeah, thank you, Bob, for getting this recorded. So, so coming up, as I'm sure you've been told in many places, but we have our annual meeting. It's getting closer. It's coming up on June 24th to the 26th. And you probably have received the Kelsey, and in there you can register for the annual meeting now. So I encourage you to take a look at it, and there's some really good workshops, as well as there'll be some great hikes, and it's just a great weekend. So I encourage you guys to sign up for it.
Andrea?
Yes?
I'll interrupt you. Say, if you're going to sign up, do it as fast as you can, as soon as you can. It is really getting full rapidly. So time is of the essence.
Okay. All right. So I guess I better register soon too.
Yes, you better.
Right. Okay. So just a little update on what's going on with the Kelsey chapter. We had several Zoom presentations, and tonight is the last one, but all of the presentations have been recorded, and you can find them if you go to the Native Plant Society website and click on the activities tab, and then you can scroll down and find not only the Kelsey chapter Zoom presentations, but others as well. And we're right now planning a bunch of field trips. And so if any of you have any ideas for what would make a nice field trip, if you have any interest in co-leading one, or an area to go explore, then please reach out to our website or to our email, Kelsey Chapter MNPS@gmail.com, or to any of the people that you know are in the chapter, the officers, and just let us know your ideas, because you know what happens is from what we put into our chapter. So we are definitely still looking for input from more people as we plan our upcoming field trips. And just a little update on the 6th Ward Native Garden and Medicinal Meadow that our chapter president, Mark Majerus, has been working on along with some other members. And they've been cleaning up the 6th Ward Community Garden, which was, it was kind of a native garden at one point. It kind of went into disarray. So they've been cleaning it up and getting it ready for replanting, removed a bunch of invasives, and it is ready for replanting. So there's been some plants that have been purchased. And if you have any interest in planting medicinal plants, please contact Mark at either through the Kelsey chapter MNPS@gmail.com, or you can contact him directly, majerus13@gmail.com. But that's in an email that was sent out to everybody. So should be able to go to that email to get the email. Go to the email to get the email. All right. So Bob, do you know of any other announcements or any upcoming news that I should present? Okay. All right. Well, it's a pretty limited list right now, but more will be coming. So we're going to start off with tonight's presentation. And again, I'm welcoming you all to the Kelsey chapter's last Zoom presentation of the winter 21-22. We'll probably resume them again next year. And tonight's presentation is by Kendra Herman, who's going to share her experience in germinating native plants. Kenda is a native to Montana from the Dillon area. She earned 2 bachelor degrees in environmental sciences from the University of Montana at Western, which is in Dillon. And her degrees emphasized wetland management, biology, and geochemistry. She has more than 10 years of experience in the fields of botany, ecology, and wildlife, where she has worked for the National Park Service, the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest, and for the Restoration Ecology Lab at the University of Montana, and which also included completing quite a bit of graduate coursework. More recently, she has moved to Helena, where she lives with her husband, who's a teacher at one of our public schools. And in 2014, she started her own business, Montana Native Plant Services, which allowed her to design and install native landscaping that was water-wise, pollinator-friendly, and based on ecological and restoration fundamentals that she learned through her academics. And since 2020, she has been the botany data assistant at the Montana Natural Heritage Program here in Helena. So Kenda's also involved with the Helena Community Gardens, and she heads up the beds at the Plymouth Congregational Church. So if you're driving by those beds, look around, you might see her working in those beds. So with that, I'm going to ask everybody to go ahead and turn off your video just to save any bandwidth. And Kenda will keep hers open and provide her presentation. And if you take your mouse and either scroll to the top or the bottom of your screen, you should find some options. And one of them is a chat. And if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we'll open it up to a question session. So let's save our questions for the end of the time period. And yeah, and I think with that, Kenda, I'm going to hand it over to you, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Andrea, for such a kind introduction. That was overboard. That was great. So I'm Kenda. I'm gonna back off on my self-introduction stuff because Andrea did it all and then some. I hope this gets an obsession brewing for some of you and worsens it for others. Through my work experience, in and out of my work experience, I've been involved with native plant propagation, and I was a slow learner to that game. I kind of got into gardening first, hit some hiccups along the way. So I just want to share some of the better things and some of the mistakes not to make that I've encountered along the way. Getting natives in your landscape is it's simply not as difficult as you might think it is to achieve. So yeah, I just want to talk about some of the tips and tricks. And whether your aim is to supplement your existing native plant scene or you're beginning like a journey to start getting rid of sod grass. I hope that these are some take-home things for you to kind of get your own little native plant nursery brewing.
All right, so let's just hold on a minute. I think, oh, Kenda, are you back? Recording again. Wonderful, take it on.
I wonder if it helps for me to stop my video.
Yeah, you could go ahead and do that. Are you with us, Kenda?
Yep, you can't hear me?
No, I couldn't hear you. I can hear you now. I can hear you now. I'm not hearing right now, though.
So there are just a myriad of benefits to propagating native plants. It's just too many to talk about. So I'm going to talk just about the basic survival mechanisms that the biological organisms need to survive. Three basic things to complete a life, the basic biological life cycles: food, water, and sex. From the food front, a thing that people don't talk about enough is the mind-blowing biochemical miracle that plants conduct that we call photosynthesis. Plants make almost all of the food on Earth out of water, a little CO2, and energy that they've harvested off of photons. It's unbelievable. Plants eat light. Let that soak in. Yet I've buried the lead. Plants make almost all of the food. So every carbon chain that we consume roughly comes from plants. The entire animal kingdom depends on plant survival. It's very important that plants have what they need. Oh shoot, we're back here. It's food, water, and sex. Because they eat light and have plentiful carbon dioxide, it's still, and well, it still sometimes rains. 2 out of 3 major needs are met. Well, there are always trade-offs, right? While plants can perform the miracle of photosynthesis, they cannot move. So sex needs to show up to them like an Amazon order. Pollination is the single most visible and important ecosystem service, and it is crucial for 60 to 70% of all plant species and 35% of global crop production. So it's just it's such an important foundation to our entire food web. Primary consumers, especially many pollinators, native bees, wasps, flies, moths, butterflies, are all suffering steep population declines. And habitat loss, including chronic fragmentation, is arguably the primary factor inflicting the strongest negative impacts. So there are so few opportunities to undo ecological problems, but at a small scale, your yard has potential to return desperately needed habitat back to invertebrate animals. Native plants, especially when a diverse variety are available, provide the best sources of pollen and nectar, highest nutrition. Many pollinators, especially butterflies, depend on specific species for laying larvae. From the perspective of a native bee, such sites provide food and water, or provide food and shelter, well, there otherwise is nothing of value to them. And then up the food chain, there's the perspective of a bird, where these such sites now offer a snack of an insect, where otherwise there'd be nothing, and so on and so on. So there's just this little ecological hack where propagating natives, getting them brewing in, especially in these like urban to urbanish environments, serves to unfragment microsites, and a little bit goes a long way. Then it further provides high quality food and shelter and supports that critical co-evolved foundation of the food web. So co-occurring native plants and their pollinators form that foundation. And I just wish I understood earlier that growing native plants was really that easy. I had it in my head that it wasn't. Well, the thing is, native seeds are not garden seeds. Your garden vegetables have to be planted in this artificial environment because they haven't evolved. They certainly haven't evolved to survive the Montana winter, and they just need a longer season than we can provide outside. But native plants kind of know how to handle stuff. So that was really my first major mistake. It was like a mindset mistake. I was gathering seeds, cleaning and storing them in order to grow them out in the spring with my garden goods. And like, even though I think about plants all the time, it was hard to get out of my head about how different native plants behave like compared to garden vegetables. So yeah, first things first, just you don't need to get all your seedling gear involved or sacrifice your precious springtime. It's just, you can actually just focus your spring on the other great nature hack, which is growing your own food. Ooh, and I won't go there. Tangents aside. So what do I mean by native plants know how to handle Mother Nature's tough love? So these plants are, their genome is a storage house for extensive amounts of experience and natural information. So the fact that they're in the landscape is just proof that they're capable of surviving. So I had to go out today and take pictures of yellow bells doing yellow bell stuff, and this little shooting star, like really just like starting to take off, a little rocket, and a passiflower just hunkering down for a little bit of a better day. So it's a major time savings if you don't like gather your seeds and clean them and store them for ages. You can just direct sow them or in the late fall, roughly, generally when material starts to ripen, just put it in a pot with potting soil, top it with sand, mulch over the pots in the winter. I have to protect pots with some kind of mesh fabric. It didn't lend for a cute picture, so the mesh fabric didn't make the photo, but it's just so easy. So you're sort of outsourcing this job to mean old Mother Nature. And it's actually just the perfect series of events for them to survive. In the winter, you just go skiing. In the spring, screw with your garden. But now you can start looking for seedlings. As it heats up, you want to move your pots to a shady place or like get some shade cloth involved. And that's the only time that you can really let stuff go and cause damage, is if those germinating, if small germination starts to dry out too soon, too fast. So if you put them in the shade and they're remotely wet and cool, you almost, you're watering them once a week rather than worrying about them during the day while you're at work. And those guys, they need a lot of freeze thaw action for reasons we'll talk about later. Truly, unless they're bone dry or in standing water, they're well equipped to survive. So the just throw it in a pot and walk away method is you're already there. You want like a little bit of a more advanced take on some of these topics. I've done a lot of shoot propagation and have been involved occasionally with like some heavier techniques, breaking dormancy to get the seed on its way rather than waiting years and years for some species. So the vast majority of my shoot propagation experience has been with stem cuttings of willow and cottonwood and occasional dogwood. I've done it less with golden currant and chokecherry, and I didn't have very much success, but I've seen it happen, so I know it's true. But this kind of plant propagation just from stem cuttings can be done with a wide variety of angiosperms and conifers. It's
she cut out. That was happening before.
You guys hear me?
Yep, you're back now.
Okay. So other than the species on the slide, I haven't spent very much time applying this method to aspen. It's just for my work purposes, it was just an unlikely species to select for restoration. Let's see, sorry, I think it skipped a part. Yeah, I don't know if you heard this part, but shoot propagation is commonly used to clone dozens of woody species, angiosperms, conifers. It's a great tool to get a plant on its way and skip the whole myriad of difficult dormancy breaking that is often reliably features owned by shrubs and trees. Okay. All right, so in shoot cuttings, it's just, there's not very much magic about it. You just cut shoots to, I like to cut shoots to a length that I'm gonna get roughly at least a third above ground material and half to 2/3 below ground material. I make sure the stems themselves are relatively clean, just to start them off strong with the fight against microbial activity. Clean diagonal cuts at the bottom, if necessary at the top of each stems. Don't mix up sometimes with willow shoots especially, they become really uniform if they're cut at the top and the bottom. They sometimes find their way in the ground upside down, and that's a tough start even for willow. I do damage to one side of the stem along the bottom. Again,
Okay, you froze again, Kenda.
see. We were, I can't remember where we were. Did we do damage to inside of the stems?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, get those dormant stems that are nice and clean into a bucket of just plain water. And especially with dogwood, they seem like they need a little bit more input. So aeration, I use an air pump, just a really simple air pump. It's like a solar, it has a little solar panel on it, so I can leave it outside, and it kind of keeps oxygen brewing through the bucket, at least while the sun's shining. And with dogwoods, I'll also make sure that there are I'll cut up some salix species, some willow material, and put it in the bucket with it. And that's pretty tried and true method for, the salix family has a lot of these like hormones and rooting specific chemicals that kind of spread throughout that zone where the stems are wet, and it helps those it just helps those root nodes arrive, helps the stem quit being a stem and become an underground plant part. Ooh, okay, so you can put live stems that haven't had their roots grown out directly in the ground, or you can let them come out of dormancy in that bucket of water. I've had more success with let the root nodes form first and then put it in the ground, but often restoration sort of applications don't allow for that excessive amount of time. Willows, however, are quite a bit, in my experience, wildly more successful with just the stab a dormant stem into the ground method. Oh, yeah, so while the dogwoods they just don't do as well with that restoration method, just stabbing it straight in the ground. And I don't know that I've seen a dogwood that didn't have some sort of rooted material on it survive after a couple of years. For the first year, a lot of those just sticks in the ground look dead. And like, you need to give it a couple of years. It may be only mostly dead, which is slightly alive. Give it another year with dogwood, but I've seen willow sprout just back to life after about 4 years of planting, or yeah, 4 years after planting. Sticks that I expect not to be alive now have leaves. So yeah, these are like trickier techniques, but true varsity moves when you want to get involved with, once you have grown up some native plants, you've got some forbs going, some grasses, some stuff that's easy to regenerate just in your backyard, then of course you'll be interested in like starting things from seed that are more difficult. And dormancy is kind of this hurdle that's really species specific. That is, it's just a frustrating thing to overcome if you're not keyed into like the species types of requirements. Okay, so I'm not freezing up. I just lost my space. So in these cases, germination needs to be forced using stratification and scarification. And at least for me, when people presume that growing natives is like this complex, expensive sorcery, like to me, I think it was because of these two terms. The word scary is right in scarify. Seed dormancy is a plant strategy to both survive difficult conditions, sometimes several years, and also to avoid germinating until conditions are optimal for the plant to succeed. In general, stratify means that the seed needs to experience a cold, wet period that's analogous to the winter. The winter that would exist in that specific species native range. And so that relationship with the seed coat and the embryo sets off just a set of chemical reactions. It's just biochemical signals that need to be well timed with environmental conditions. And then with scarifying, this is a method that is more focused on physically damaging a really tough waterproof seed coat. There's a really wild range of methods used to achieve each of these germination requirements for specific species. And it's because like dormancy as a plant trait, as a mechanism, has really varied. It has evolved in different ways around the plant itself, losing dormancy and becoming a germinant over time. So while there are some plants are going to be what am I trying to say? Some plants like the willix and the salix species and cottonwoods are non-dormant. When they go to seed in the spring, their seeds go right down into wet substrate in spring conditions, and they're meant to germinate right away. And they're non-viable really after a minute if they hit hot concrete or it's just not wet enough. We know that cottonwoods will struggle to reproduce. Okay, so yeah, I made a whole slide about it. The willows, aspen, and cottonwood are these non-dormant. It's just kind of the one end of an extreme of a variety of levels of dormancy. And then on the other, like the more extreme side, are these double dormant species. They have multiple mechanisms, things inside and outside of the seed coat that signal germination requirements or signal the germination to the hold off for another year or two. So that is a really, dormancy is, to me, is like really, it's just a really interesting character, a plant trait that really, it just ties into the ecological story of the species and its range and its location. I mean, it's really amazing. So this is a little baby Baroque that taught me about struggling with dormancy mechanisms. And it was among my first successes. But I learned in hindsight that it was just accidentally, I had left some oak seeds in a cooler kind of for a while, and it got moist enough. It experienced a cold and moist enough environment that it didn't germinate the first year, but it came alive the next year. And it wasn't because of something I did on purpose, but it was, in hindsight, I really see why I what? I don't know what happened to my next slides. So I'm panicking a little bit. Anyway, Baroque it's like its own little cosmic joke, because I had that Baroque for 8 years before I sold the house, and it was barely hip high. So these are just some of the jokes that nature plays on you, and just some of the fun experiences that I tripped and spilled through before I landed on some knowledge about it. So I hope it saves you a little bit of time. Oh, farts. I have so this is, I'm gonna wrap it up. This is what my next slides talk about. I don't have a next slide, but the thing that I like to convey to people about having your little native plant nursery and just like always be propagating is that over time you're going to find new places for new plants. You're going to have dog damage, and your dog is going to dig a hole. You can replace that with I've been using yarrow in the dog yard. Blue flax works amazing. They're total survivors. Idaho fescue just it vigorously germinates from seed. So like those are some of the species that, just because they're not hard, it's just so easy to reproduce more over the course of time. It's really fun to watch this stuff happen. And you don't have to make decisions about this stuff. Once natives are established and in a pot, you can hang on to them for a long time. If you feel like something has grown too large to handle, to stay moist during the day, and you just scoot that thing to a different pot, a bigger pot. You can give them away. You can like teach. I love giving them to kids. It's like such a great teaching tool for people who are not so like, probably like me, like uncertain, like just not connected to the experience, and it just seems like a little bit too much. But it's not. It's easier than you think, and you should dive right in. And as far as how you're like allowing your landscape to come together, a lot of people kind of scoff at having just a myriad of species and like this hodgepodge, picture messiness, but I urge people to just let stuff grow wherever you can get it going. You can always move it over time. This stuff is so hardy, and like it dares you to kill it after it's established. You need to like not do it in the heat of the summer, but in the shoulder seasons, these things are really flexible, and you can get away with a lot. Yeah, so I just welcome your questions. I'm super sorry that I lost my last slide. And I came in a little below time, and that was probably perfect.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kenda. Yeah, and I have your presentation up, but I can't share it either. So I have to work out my technical problems as well. Anyways, but this was great. And we do have some questions here.
Oh, great.
So just give me a second here. And if anybody has questions, please type them into the chat. Connie asks, how do you know which seeds need stratification and which need scarification?
So in general, there are kind of some rules of thumb, but there's also a lot of uncertainty as to like why some species are such tough little buggers and they need so much scarification and stratification, that like double dormancy thing. On the Native Plant Society's landscaping tab on their website, either right now or coming soon, Mark has assembled a really awesome spreadsheet of like those exact species specific requirements. And that's totally the resource that I would use if I wanted to dig into those things. The things that don't need a lot of that extra fussy stuff is again, like real broad rule of thumb, but those native species that grow at the elevation where you are, those like lower montane to valley native range species are kind of the ones that are easy going with they're good with where they are. Conifers, all of the anything that has like a really tough outer coat for their seed is probably going to need some sort of scarification and maybe also stratification. Pinus contorta is one of those creatures it's pretty well known that while it doesn't need direct fire, as that's its scarification strategy, it does need a pretty extreme hot, cold, low moisture process in order for it to give up hanging on, I guess, in order to allow that reaction to let germination progress.
Okay, great. So people should go to the Native Plant Society website and look for a spreadsheet. I forgot where it's organized, but someplace we have stuff for native landscaping. And so Kenda, would you be willing to share your email address in case people want to ask questions directly to you about challenges that they're having with growing their particular plants?
Of course.
Okay,
Put it
so
in
maybe,
the chat.
yeah, so Kenda will type her email into the chat there. And meanwhile, Katie has a question, and she wants to know how large of a stem of willow or other shrub is needed for propagating shoots.
That's a good question. For material that I'm going to bring to my house and kind of fuss over and take care of, I like that second year sucker growth. It's like not a half of an inch in diameter, but for restoration purposes where I'm just going to stuff stuff in the ground and hope a lot and it's not going to get supplemental water, etc. The 1.5 to 2.5 inch material it just stores more sugar and just has a better shot at getting to where it needs to go. And in terms of length, for restoration purposes, well, for most purposes, I want the material to go as deep into the ground as I can get it, while leaving like at least 1/3 of that length above ground. And that's pretty easy. If you just cut stuff long, get it in the ground, you can just cut the top off.
And then how well do you have to keep it watered? I mean, do you want it, does it need to be constantly wet?
It really doesn't. Like, that's my little joke with at least with the willow propagation. Those things I thought they came back from the dead. They were in, well, it's pretty dry ground. It's like Lower Beaverhead River sort of creek adjacent property, but definitely not deep enough to touch like any sort of hydrological lens. It wasn't getting groundwater.
Okay, and you weren't supplementing water.
I do it when I take cuttings just for my own farting around.
Mhm.
I will supplement them with water. I will keep them in the bucket for like until they have leaves and have like
wow.
a decent amount of below ground material. And then I'll then I'll put them in a big hole with like yummy compost, and I'll put them in a nice place, and then I'll water them again. So that's just not the environment that the restoration, style really enjoys.
Right, right. Okay, so Karen is interested, and I am too, and maybe many others. What species have you started in pots in the fall time?
Like almost anything I can get my hands on that's like, just like showing up around my property. I'll try to the Lewis's blue flax it's one of my favorite things right now. I I have this cheatgrass battle that I'm fighting uphill right now, and I feel like I've been able to like fight back the cheatgrass by planting potted uh, Linum lewisii, pulling cheatgrass back and seeding over the top of it. And even though we think that linum that is like this very erect and like linear, not casting a shadow kind of plant, when it's little, it is like laying flat like a dead spider. You know what I'm saying? Like it's creating its own little ground cover. And yeah, so I mean, in terms of favorites, that is definitely one of them. Gaillardia, blanket flower is so great. Live on no water, just germinates on like ash looking limestone soils. Monarda is the Monarda fistulosa is one that is like, people kind of like are like, oh, mint family, scary, it'll spread. But that is something that that is a quality that is really working well at my place at the moment. Rudbeckia, just like a gorgeous pollinator, gets really big. I don't seem to like, I'll plant out 5 Rudbeckia and like 2 will get eaten by deer. So there's something about that plant that that one's really enjoyable to me because I don't have to fence it off and squirm every time there's a deer in the yard. Let's see, which other ones do I really love? Why am I spacing this? Did I say Idaho fescue? I want it everywhere.
And you mentioned yarrow before.
Yarrow. People have a beef with yarrow. It's great as a sod substitute, like it and a ground cover. And it will grow like into the gravel in the driveway. It's just great for keeping the cheatgrass back. I don't know. That's kind of my preferred. Anybody who wants to fight cheatgrass with me is welcome here.
Yeah. Do you have any other favorite native weedy species?
Yeah, I mean, let me think. I love, let's see, I said Monarda. I just need to pick up this other page.
Ooh.
Oh, prairie smoke. Prairie smoke is one that, I really thought that that would be a bugger to get going by seed, because it's, it just seems like a hard seed coat little bugger, but it really spreads well. And, once you get a little patch going, it moves around and fills in the spaces between bunch grasses. I have a lot of shade at my place, so I also like get pretty, I lean toward the shade living species. Oh, one that I can never get to germinate, but I can use US currency to acquire, are just columbines. And that's an upper elevation range kind of plant, and without looking, I suspect that it requires like a more rigorous stratification period than I've been offering seeds in the past.
So Kate was wondering if you have any favorites for competing with field bindweed. And then she states that she has a strategy with bindweed so far has been low growing plants that won't support it climbing all over the place, like spreading dogbane.
Boy,
Oh, so yeah.
this
So
is my ears, because field bindweed is my new nemesis.
so she's planting really low growing plants so that it has nothing to climb onto.
Yeah, so like Antinarias, like the Antinaria rosea, that's another favorite for low growing ground cover. And once it starts getting flowers, it's slower to self-seed and move around and spread, but I really like it when it does.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, keep me posted on your field bindweed trade secrets, and I want to know everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question. Are you still managing your business, or what?
I'm just managing to say no to a lot of opportunities, but I still do odds and ends of small projects, just mostly people I love and don't charge though. So let's say no.
And Connie was wondering, and where do you get your native seeds? Do you collect them yourself, or are you purchasing them?
So that is another thing that, like, it's kind of preaching to the choir, but there of course are ethics involved with collecting from the wild. If you're in an extensive population, a fairly common thing, like I don't think it's that big a deal to take seed heads and propagate in an area where they wouldn't otherwise be successful. Of course, I mean, rare-ish plants, like if it feels icky, it's probably icky. With seeds that you do want from harder to acquire species, there are a lot of good native plant nurseries around this state, and as far as seed source, even GardenWorks has a pretty great variety of bulk seeds. And people kind of scoff because it's like $40 a pound for this or that, but you don't need a pound of anything ever, unless you have like a moonscape to revegetate. A handful of seeds will send you on this adventure. You can fill 4-inch pots, one seed head of a lot of plants. Like, it's going to be more seeds than you really need anyway. So if you want a variety, just take a seed head here and there, and it would have to be pretty rare to like do any population damage, if you're just taking one.
Yeah, great. So Bryce had a comment that he has had success with pushing out bindweed by planting a windbreak of junipers. He has 45 junipers in a row, and they have pushed out a really thick bindweed infestation.
That's really good to know. So it's the horizontalis, the horizontal juniper, or the common one?
Oh, good question. Bryce will have to tell us.
Oh, I suspect it's the horizontal that it can't find success by climbing to the top and, you know, strangling it out.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Wichita blue junipers.
Okay, I'm gonna keep that.
Not exactly the native ones, but
Right. Well, it's all the tools in your pocket that you can.
yeah.
That you can
So
handle.
Shane has a question and wondering if you've had experience propagating lomatiums or other members of the Apiaceae family.
So I know that lomatiums are kind of a distinctly they need like a heavy hand with the scarification stratification system. And I might be wrong, but I think they could be both. Shane, you have to right away, you have to get this spreadsheet. I'm not 100% sure if it's on the website yet, but it is really well compiled. It's most of it is species are easily accessed in, you know, the 100 square mile neighborhood.
Yeah, I was just looking. I think it is on our website, and Bob had posted where it's at.
Yeah, it's species specific, best of our knowledge on a lot of plants. I'd say there's like 80 plants.
Yeah, so check out, it's under the plant landscaping page on the Native Plant Society's website.
Right.
So, and it's a paper prepared by Mark Majerus on germination of wildland seeds.
Yeah, it's a really good, it's good spreadsheet. It's great. Yeah.
Great. All right, well, that I think is about it for questions. And I think this is a really great talk to get us to begin thinking about, you know, growing things again, and maybe what we might want to put into some little cups, put some soil in the cups, put some seeds in it this fall, and see what happens over the winter and comes up next spring.
Yeah, it's a perfect time to keep your eyes peeled for little populations or private property, friends' yards, and other opportunities where you're not like, where you can take plants and not do damage. Find a house that is about to be built. That is how I got this whole suite of my rock garden that belongs in the scratch gravels, but is up here in South Hills.
Yeah, great. And that's also how I got my rocks in my front yard, is I asked a landowner who had quite a big pile, and he was like, yeah, I really don't want those rocks in my yard. So he allowed me to use them, and I created some garden space with them. So I do want to tell everybody that just, you probably saw an email again, but there is another talk in 2 weeks that's hosted by the state board for the Native Plant Society, and it's on landscaping, and it's a panel of experts, and it's a chance to have more of a group dynamic in learning about landscaping. So that's on April 27th at 7 p.m. So check that out and register for it. And with that, I thank you all for coming and listening today. And I thank you very much, Kenda, for giving us a good presentation, and lining us out on some little tricks and trades of how we can start native plants in our own backyard. So
thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. And everybody have a good evening. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you at the next Native Plant Society